Days after countless North Korean soldiers poured onto South Korean soil, U.S. President Harry S. Truman urged the Pentagon to take any necessary action to assist their beleaguered capitalist allies in the Far East. Supported by Soviet-supplied T-34 tanks and Yak and Shturmovik warplanes, the invasion from the north wiped out the unassuming southern defenses as discreet boats from the North Korean People's Army infiltrated troops along the South Korean shore. Meanwhile, American air and sea power began to intervene on behalf of the South, operating from nearby bases in Japan. But when it came to ground forces, it was nearly impossible to reach the South Korean coastline before the relentless invaders razed the entire country. Nonetheless, there was one option. The southeast port of Pusan could stand its ground until reinforcements arrived. But if not for a humble patrol boat on the first night of the invasion, the critical port would have been the first to fall. Crew funding. Following its independence from the Nippon Empire, South Korea was in dire economic straits. With scarce natural resources and financial means, the recently founded South Korean Navy, or ROKN, had no way of purchasing new ships. As such, it was left with only landing craft, vehicle, personnel boats, and light wooden patrol ships. Admiral Sun-Woo Lee, the first chief of naval operations, soon emphasized the need to replace the deteriorated fleet with modern vessels. Consequently, the ROKN resolved to raise the cost of a new warship entirely on its own. In June of 1949, the Navy organized the Vessel Construction Finance Committee, inviting every sailor from top officers to cadets to contribute 5 to 10% of their salary. Some midshipmen gathered scrap metal for selling, while their wives helped by doing laundry and sewing. After 4 months, the Navy had earned $15,000, insufficient to acquire a naval vessel of the quality the ROKN aspired to. But upon hearing the news of the Navy's significant effort, the South Korean government jumped in, providing the sea service with an additional $45,000. With a humble total of $60,000, the incipient Navy made a bold purchase, acquiring a training ship for the United States Merchant Marine Academy, the former USS PC-823 Ensign Whitehead. 100 shells. The USS PC-823 PC-461 class submarine chaser was laid down on June 2, 1943. She was built at the Lethem D. Smith Shipbuilding Company in Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin, and launched on January 15, 1944, but not commissioned until 6 months later. The ship went on to serve in the Western Atlantic Ocean during the last stages of World War II and was assigned to air-sea rescue duties for a better part of her career. Later on, in early 1946, she was decommissioned and transferred to the United States Marine Commission, and 2 years later, she transferred to the United States Merchant Marine Academy at Kings Point, New York, renamed Ensign Whitehead, and repurposed as a training ship before being removed from the Navy list. However, duty called once again in September of 1949, when she was purchased by the Republic of Korea Navy. The 52-meter-long ship would then serve under a new name, ROKS Pusan PC-701. In addition, 15 Korean naval officers were sent to the U.S., where they devoted themselves to fixing her. The ship was in such poor condition that she was practically a floating engine. But after 2 months of intense work, the Navy's first ocean-going vessel was born. Pusan then departed New York for the Hawaii Naval Station, where she was fitted with a 3-inch main deck gun, and then stopped on Guam to buy less than 100 shells of ammunition, enough for the sailors to practice aiming and firing the gun. At last, the ship arrived in South Korea, reaching Jinhae Naval Base on April 10, 1950, barely 2 months before the outbreak of the Korean War. Target practice. On the dawn of Sunday, June 25, 1950, tensions along the 38th parallel erupted. There had been prior clashes along the border, many initiated by the South, and even blunt rebellions inside South Korea. However, with both the democratic government in Seoul and the socialist government in Pyongyang claiming to be the sole legitimate rulers of a unified Korea, their opposing ideals inevitably led to war. As such, the temporary border now became the battlefield. Soon, the Korean People's Army crossed the 38th parallel, justifying the assault by arguing that the Republic of Korea's troops had struck first. Perhaps more interestingly, They sought to arrest and execute a so-called bandit and traitor, South Korean President Syngman Rhee. In truth, not even the CIA nor the United Nations expected an imminent invasion, mistakenly interpreting the movement of North Korean troops as defensive measures. In the words of American General William Lynn Roberts, commander of the Korean Military Advisory Group, any North Korean invasion would provide the South Korean trainees with, quote, target practice. However, when the invasion did occur, it was massive. The North Koreans were armed by the Soviets and reinforced by Chinese troops and veteran People's Liberation Army units. Moreover, they had undergone rigorous training, which conferred them military superiority over their southern neighbors. At the outbreak of the war, the North Korean army had up to 200,000 troops minutely organized into 10 infantry divisions, 1 tank division, and 1 Air Force division, not counting reserve forces and equipment. In contrast, the South Korean military was not only unprepared, but ill-equipped. Regarding the navies, both sides possessed only small warships and would play a critical role as seaborne artillery for each of their ground forces. Even so, the purchase of the $60,000 ship would prove, as military analyst Sebastian Roblin put it, quote, one of the most timely and cost-efficient investments in the history of naval warfare. Baptism of fire. During a late-night patrol into the early morning of June 26th, less than 24 hours after the North Korean invasion began, Captain Nam Choi was in command of the subchaser Pusan on the South Korean eastern coast, tasked with keeping a lookout for infiltrators. Abruptly, an unidentified ship appeared on the horizon. The crew spotted an unknown vessel approximately 20 miles from the critical harbor of Pusan, which was in a poor state of combat readiness. Pusan then challenged the mysterious ship using signal lights, but she did not respond. The crew then turned the chaser's searchlights towards the intruder, exposing a 1,000-ton steam-powered merchant freighter with an estimated 600 to 1,000 soldiers from the North Korean 766 Infantry Regiment crowded on her decks. The infiltrators responded by firing heavy machine guns mounted on the freighter's decks, striking the bridge and taking down the subchaser's helmsman while severely injuring another crew member. In retaliation, the subchaser returned fire and engaged in a duel with the North Korean steamer, which frantically attempted to flee north. According to veterans of PC-701, to increase accuracy and penetration, the defenders charged forward to within 400 meters of the freighter. In the end, Pusan blasted her brand-new 3-inch gun for the first time. The Korea Strait. When the defenders opened fire with their 3-inch gun and 6 50-caliber machine guns, the North Korean soldiers threw themselves overboard to dodge the assault. They then attempted to swim toward the subchaser and come aboard. The crew of Pusan quickly repelled the incoming waves of enemies with semi-automatic M1 Garand rifles, successfully preventing them from taking over the chaser. Ultimately, the combined firepower was enough to sink the steamer between Pusan and the nearby Tsushima Island. This marked the modern Republic of Korea's Navy's first battle, which would go down in history as the Battle of Korea Strait. Interestingly, the enemy steamer was a former U.S. ship, purchased by South Korean sympathizers of the communist regime for service in North Korea's novice Korean People's Navy. Following her extraordinary participation in the Battle of Korea Strait, Pusan was deployed in several more battles during the war, namely the Incheon landing. After the Korean War, she was retired and dismantled, leaving behind a legacy of honor. A small patrol ship. If it had not been for the timely position of the PC-701 near the port of Pusan and the gallant performance of her crew, despite their modest training, it's likely the crucial port would have been taken. With a force of over 600 troops, the North Koreans could have successfully landed and occupied the vital stronghold, leading to an irreparable loss for the South Koreans. The early days of the invasion were especially chaotic, and the feeble and virtually undefended port would have hopelessly fallen to even a small force. For the remainder of the war, Pusan continued serving as the last territory toehold for the Southerners and their United Nations allies on the peninsula. As such, that simple encounter on the first night of the war was of immense consequence, leading many experts to sustain that this single naval action might as well have prevented the fall of South Korea to communism. As Roblin wrote, quote, But for a small, crowd-funded patrol ship with a single 3-inch deck gun, South Korea, as we know it today, might simply not exist. Thank you for watching our video. Don't miss out on more epic encounters from modern history by subscribing to Dark Seas and the rest of our Dark Documentaries channels. And show your support by hitting that like button and clicking the bell icon to be notified of our latest content. Stay tuned.